Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Alan Abrahamson. I come originally from a part of the United States in the middle of the country, a state called Ohio. I lived in California now for almost 30 years. When I was a little boy in Ohio, I used to sit in my high school and look out at a cornfield and the cows, and I would dream of surfing in the Pacific Ocean. So it is my distinct pleasure to welcome to the stage the master of surfing in the Pacific Ocean and all oceans, Laird Hamilton. Laird?
Thank you for having me. It was a long flight.
It was a long flight. Just getting here was heroic, so let's start there. Jean-Pierre, if you could start by showing some of the slides of what it took Laird to get here. It has been raining like crazy on Kauai, where Laird lives. Can you start that slideshow, please? Why don't you tell us what's been going on here? Oh, wait, hang on one sec. Before we get there, my apologies. For those of you who don't speak American English the way Laird and I do, and we've been instructed to speak a little slower than we might ordinarily do. Translation channels, 4 in Catalan, 5 in Spanish, 6 in French, 7 in English, for those of you who don't understand our English. Also, please remember to take just a second and don't turn your phones off, but please do put them on silent or mute. And remember, you'll have the opportunity to ask Laird your questions by using the My GSFB function, They'll go right here into my iPad, and we will for sure ask him your questions. Okay. Now, the photos, please, of what's been going on Kauai. This is just some of the damage from the storm. There we go. There's somebody's brand new car. Not very good. All right, what's been going on where you live?
Well, the island that I grew up on is the wettest spot on Earth, and the average rainfall is 400, 500 inches a year. And this last week it's been raining somewhere in the range of about, I want to say, a foot to 2 feet every 12 to 24 hours. And so the bridges have been washed out, and the highways are all caving in and collapsing. And at one point, one of the nights, we had a thunder and lightning storm that lasted for about 17 hours. And it was thunder and lightning for 17 hours straight, which I've never really experienced, even though I grew up on one of the wettest places on Earth.
And what did your girls say about all that?
The kids love it. You know, they run around, they go in the hot tub and run around in the rain, and they huddle up when the lightning's and the thunder's happening. But I think they're kind of used to it. It's part of our life is around the weather. So I think they've kind of have grown up being used to the weather playing a huge part of our life, and so they're not totally freaked out. But when there's big bolts of lightning and loud thunder, they like to curl up next to you.
So explain about the islands. I've been lucky enough to marry into a family that's Hawaii crazy. I've been out to the islands probably 20 or 25 times. I'll be in Maui again in 2 weeks. The islands are all roughly built the same way. There's a wet side and a dry side. You live on the wet side of Kauai. Would you explain for people who've never been out there the way this works?
Yeah, well, we have a consistent weather pattern that blows from the northeast, which we call the trade winds. Obviously, the trade winds are all over the world. They're called the trade winds because that's the way the ships sailed, because it was the most consistent wind flow, and that just brings all the weather. So the northeast and the north sides of the island are the wet sides, and then the south sides are the sides where all the resorts are, with the pink umbrellas and the swimming pools.
Right. So, Jean-Pierre, can you show some of the pictures of what Hawaii looks like, please? While we're doing this. There we go. And where you live is on the wet sides here. It's very jungly, very tropically, to coin a word, verdant. And that's where the good surfing is, also on the north sides.
Yeah, I mean, Hawaii in general has a unique tropicalness because of the fact that we don't have any dangerous animals. So we don't have snakes. We don't have anything poisonous really, and so that makes it. You know, if I said that there was a place that was like the Garden of Eden, it would have been Hawaii because there's really nothing dangerous there, except giant sharks and huge waves.
Giant. Except for those two little things.
And volcanoes.
And volcanoes, exactly. So again, for people who aren't familiar, how many islands are there?
There's five major islands, and actually they were all created by the same hotspot on the ocean, on the Pacific Plate. And Kauai is the oldest, the one I grew up on. And then the Big Island, which is the largest and still has an active volcano, is the youngest.
And they run from south east to northwest. And
Yes.
you live on the northwesternmost of the island.
Sure. We call ourselves buoy 1.5. So we're the one when the storms hit, they hit us first. In fact, I was in the strongest hurricane that ever hit land on Kauai.
Iniki, is that right?
Eva. Eva was the first one. Iniki, yes.
Right.
And
And so, what was it like being in this particular storm? I mean, this was, not a hurricane in any way, shape, or form, but.
This storm was just had a lot of water. It rained consistently for 3 days straight, day and night, and just the volume of water that was coming out of the sky, you just don't see that in too many places.
So there's a very distinct Hawaiian culture, and you've been lucky enough, unlike me, to grow up in this culture. Can you describe a little bit about this culture? And you and I were talking before. You've got to be the most non-howly there is.
Yeah, I try to explain it that I look very white, but I think very brown.
Yes.
And actually, the Polynesians, which are Hawaiians, were the greatest navigators in the world before there was longitude and latitude. They were able to find these little islands in the middle of the ocean just through celestial navigation and the understanding of texture of the ocean and birds and some other things. So the culture, the Polynesian culture is based around the ocean, and the Hawaiians are the creators of surfing. And if you look at surfing's impact on the world, it's surfing itself from this little Polynesian island has created windsurfing, snowboarding, skateboarding, every board sport that there is, and it's pretty incredible fact that it came from this native people that really probably began surfing more out of necessity than out of pleasure, and then once they mastered it, it became a sport.
And you are, I think it's fair to say, the heir to this tradition. I mean, really.
I don't know if I want that responsibility, but yeah, I grew up in a situation that had a lot of racial tension, and so the ocean was a place of equality. And one thing is that I always said that you don't have to like me, but you might respect me. And so that was a big part of, separate from that, I was just drawn to the ocean as a child, and I lived in the best place to do it. I loved it because it was, I always say we're all equal before a wave. And so in a way that it crossed the boundaries of any kind of racial divide. And in being in the water, you can earn respect from people that might not like you, but they'll, like I said, respect you.
So, Jean-Pierre, let's start the slides of the ocean while we talk about that's a perfect segue. How old were you when you were on the board for the first time?
I was on a board before, at 2 or 3 years old. I was on a board at a very, very young age.
I would ask everybody while the slides go around us on all 4 screens to just take a look at the colors and the textures and everything of the ocean. I mean, I was 31 when I learned how to surf. You were a little boy.
1.
Yeah, you were 1. Good God. When did you think you might be kind of good at it?
I don't think I ever thought I'd be good at it as much as that's what I thought I would do at a very young age. I thought this is what I'm going to do. I think all the people that I looked up to, all the men that were doing it were great surfers, great watermen, great divers, great sailors, and I just said I'm going to be like one of those guys, and and that was at a young age. I knew long before it was time to finish school that I wasn't going to be needing to go to school.
You brought up a word that's a distinct word. I've, again, been lucky enough since moving to California to live on the beach since then, and waterman is a word. Describe for everybody here what a waterman is.
Well, a waterman is somebody that's really versed in all aspects of the ocean, that you can sail, you can canoe, you can dive, you fish. You kind of have a relationship with the ocean that gives you an understanding to be able to do a multitude of disciplines. This particular shot is a board that we ride. It's a flying board that actually flies off the water, and it has a special purpose for. I mean, I think it's going to be the way we ride the biggest waves. That board.
So as we proceed through the slides, most people don't know, or if they do, it's still worth explaining. There are different kinds of surfboards, and you use them, or different kinds of boards in general. Let's just run through the catalog of boards. I learned to ride, for instance, on a longboard.
Well, the evolution really, when you start surfing, really comes from, first you learn with your body, then you use fins, then you use a boogie board. When I was a kid, we didn't have boogie boards. We had broken surfboards.
So for those who don't know, what's a boogie board?
A boogie board is a small foam board that's real soft that kids usually learn on, but
Goes down to about right here.
yeah, it's about a meter long, and you lay on it and you use fins to ride it, and then I described the quiver of boards as being a carpenter, and one's a square and one's a saw and a measuring tape. Each one has a specific function. Some have to do with just people's desire of what they like to use, but you have boards for big waves, you have boards for small waves, you have boards for long distance, you have boards for riding waves that are real steep, boards for laying on, boards for standing up on all the time, and boards for riding inside the wave. I mean, there's just all these different types of boards.
And do you have personal favorites, or do you just pick them the way, you pick a 7-iron to hit a shot that's 150 yards?
Yes, I have ones I like, and then there's certain things that you just use for giant waves, and a certain board for giant waves and a certain board for small waves, and I have certain boards that I ride in these certain conditions in a specific design that I like for those types of conditions, even though you could ride other ones. That's one thing that I really like about surfing, is that there's no rules. There's no right or wrong way to ride a wave. There's no right or wrong board. You can ride whatever board you want to ride, and more like an artist, express yourself whatever way you want to.
Earlier, lots of questions. We talked, you and I have talked about how the ocean just is. When you're out in the ocean, you also talked about how everyone, when you're in the ocean, you didn't have to like somebody, but you could maybe earn respect in the ocean. Can you talk a little bit about that, about how when you're out in the ocean, it's a place that demands that you respect it, and vice versa?
Well, the situation, especially when the surf gets bigger, I think that's why I always gravitated towards larger waves, is that you have a lot of camaraderie when it's dangerous, and it's a little bit like going into battle with somebody. You might not like them, but you might have a bond with them after you spend time, in a foxhole, or you spend time in battle with them. And when the surf's smaller and it's more ambiguous. You don't have that kind of defining moment, and there's not that camaraderie that you do when it's big. And so it's a different kind of, I always describe small waves as like comedies, and big waves are like, thrillers and horror films. And
so I'm the comic.
You're having fun. That's the most important thing.
I am having fun. And that's something else we've talked about. For instance, this morning I was talking with Justin Tuck and Tony Richardson. Football is something, it's a sport. They're obviously super good at it. Surfing is, well, without being overly dramatic, surfing is life. It's something you practice, you do.
Well, surfing dictates where you live. It dictates how you live. It's dictated whether you can do it or not by the weather. So You know, I always hate making dates, schedules, because I know that there'll be a giant swell. And I usually have a clause in any contract that I have that if the surf's over 20 feet, I'm out, out surfing. But it's something you can do your entire life. And I have friends that are, I have a couple of buddies that are 80, 90 years old, and they're out, they surf, and it's, it's, and you can be 2 years, 3 years old and trying to surf. So really, there's something about it that allows you to just kind of, it affects your whole life, where you go in the world, how you look at the world, your relationship with the weather, your awareness of the way the world works is changed when you have a relationship with the ocean, and surfing is one of the most intimate ways to have a relationship with the ocean.
Should it be a commercial kind of thing? I mean, obviously there's a huge industry around surfing. I mean, that's obvious. I'm in the middle of it. You're there when you're in Malibu.
Yeah.
Is that appropriate?
I think it's, man, I mean, are all the things that men do appropriate? I mean, I guess it's left up to opinions. I think, it allows opportunities for people to make a life out of it and earn a living from it, like I'm able to do.
For sure.
I think that it's like art. Should art be an industry? I mean, it can if people want to buy your paintings.
Yes.
But some artists want to paint alone in a cabinet somewhere, and they don't want anybody to see their stuff, and their stuff might be valuable after they die. But I do think that there is definitely an opposing force when you try to commercialize surfing. It just seems to be the exact opposite of what surfing is.
Do you think that what you do when you're out there riding big waves is art?
I feel that I'm an artist, but I think there's a certain commercialization to what I do because people take my pictures and use those in advertising, and people like to see those pictures. But my personal feeling of what I'm doing is I'm an artist. I'm just trying to subsidize it so I don't have to, break rocks.
A couple, there's a push on Fernando's trying to get the surfing into the Olympics.
Sure.
Do you think that's a good idea?
I think that the discipline of surfing, when you have a group of judges deciding the outcome of anything, it's always confusing. The opinions of men are always confusing. I mean, I think racing's great because you win, you lose. Sports that you score points and you win, you lose. Even within those, you have the judgments of men that affect the outcome. But I think it's difficult. I mean, and the most difficult thing, the only way you can truly put the surfing in the Olympics would be to have a wave machine to produce waves, because to really have it be a fair platform for people to express themselves, you need something that could consistently produce surf. And the ocean does it when it wants to, and it's not at Friday at 12 o'clock.
No, it's way too random. We were just looking at the picture of the flying board. You said you think that's the future. Can you explain again?
It's the future of big wave riding, and it's the future of riding waves for long distances and riding open ocean swells. And it's a board that actually flies above the water, and there's an airplane, a miniature airplane made out of metal underwater, and you steer the plane by leaning on it. So you're flying, it'd be like if you stood on top of an airplane and then you controlled how it flew.
Who developed this, Laird?
I developed the standing version. There was a seated version that they use in lakes, and then we took that and modified it.
In your garage, you figured this out?
Yeah.
Wow. How long did this? That's Hawaii right there, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. And off the Nepali coast?
Yep.
Wow. How long did that take to figure this out?
Well, I think the idea came quickly. It was I knew that it could be done. It's been the last 10 or 12 years that we've evolved it to a point now where it's becoming, to the point it's functioning. Yeah, so it's becoming to the point now it's functioning. The thing that makes it unique is that you're not affected by the texture of the water.
Yeah.
And what happens is when the waves get bigger, they move faster.
Right.
And the texture affects your ability to ride them on a conventional surfboard. And this is a little bit like suspension to a motorbike. You know, a normal surfboard's a rigid frame motorbike with no suspension, and this now all of a sudden we have huge suspension, which allows us to go a lot faster and ride waves that before were unrideable, really.
I mean, I could talk about this kind of stuff all day. Let's talk about the mechanics, the logistics, the philosophy, all of it of big wave surfing. When did this idea, the idea of really big wave surfing, start occurring to you and then your brothers in arms, if that's the right way to put it? I mean, and we'll work up to Tiapu here in a sec. And we have a video that I think will actually make people scream when they see it.
Well, I mean, I grew up when the first big wave pioneers were still pioneering big wave riding, and so those guys were my idols. I looked up to what they were doing. They were going out in the biggest seas, trying to ride the biggest waves.
All over the world.
All over the world. And I thought, I felt that was, my father was a competitive surfer. Actually, he was an artist, and then he was kind of sucked into competing, and I saw the kind of disappointments that brought him, and the confusion on how to judge surfers, like judging art or music or food. And so I gravitated towards big, because I thought, well, that's pretty definable. You can, if it's big, it's, the bigger it is, the more definable it is, and you might not like it, but you can't.
There's no argument.
It's small. Right. It's kind of like fast, big, fast, far. Those are real tangible measurements, and that's what led me towards it. I was always attracted to it. I think, instinctually, I'm a thrill seeker. I like danger and jumping off high stuff, and I like the feeling that I get.
Why do you like that?
It's something inside of me. My dad said that you're born, big wave riders are born and not made. It's like, why do men go fast on GP bikes, and why do guys go fast in Formula One cars, and why are they good drivers? I don't think you become one. I think you are one, and then you become one. And so that's something that you're just kind of born with. Maybe it's a missing chromosome that, tells you that you should be scared, or maybe you're just drawn to that sensation. I think that's part of being a man, that you like that feeling of, of the edge, of knowing the line, and maybe actually the focus that it demands so much of your attention, that's when you really feel alive and like you feel worthy, like you're actually doing something, because it demands your focus to the point where there's no other distractions. And so I was drawn to that naturally, and then it was just a matter of trying to figure out how to push that boundary, like how do we ride bigger waves, and then we got to a point where we realized that we couldn't ride them manually, and we weren't physically able to generate the speed that these large waves were traveling to catch them. And so we used windsurfers initially because they had power, but then you had a windsurfer, and it was like you were restricted by the wind. If there was no wind, you couldn't go, and if the wind was the wrong direction, you couldn't go, and then you had to go the direction of the wind. And so we wanted to try to eliminate that, and that's what really created towing in, or using a motorized, first a boat, a Zodiac, and then eventually a jet ski to bring us up to speed in order to match the speed of the wave. And then from then on, that was the beginning of kind of going into what they described as the unridden realm.
So if I could recommend a book to everybody, is a book that Susan Casey wrote called The Wave, which is really excellent, which describes all of this in great detail. Laird is sort of the protagonist of this book. It's a fantastic read, Susan Casey's The Wave. Again, to ride these waves, you have to be towed in on a jet ski. Let's play the video. Jean-Pierre. Wrong video. This is the wrong video.
Yeah, it's not the film one.
Okay, that's a great video showing Laird doing all the exciting things that Laird could do. Now let's show Laird riding the monster wave video. Apologies. So let's set the stage. Where was this and when?
That was in 2000 in Tahiti.
In a wave
The
called
Millennium.
Teapu, right? And your tow driver was?
A friend of mine, Derek Donor.
Right. And you knew about the wave was coming because you were tracking it on satellite, right?
Yeah, actually, we were supposed to leave the day before that swell, and then some friends said that it was a giant swell coming, and so we stayed. We thought we shouldn't leave.
And that wave was roughly 80 feet, if I recall?
Yeah, waves are so hard to measure because I always describe waves like dogs. You know, you can have a Saint Bernard that's giant and really gentle, and then you can have a pit bull that's small and vicious, and that's a pit bull.
Yeah.
With extra teeth.
Yeah. Well,
It's the size of a Saint Bernard.
let's say roughly 80 feet, give or take, maybe.
Well, we've ridden waves bigger than 80 feet at this point.
Of course, this was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
That was the first big wave ever ridden,
Well, that was the first
ever recorded.
time anybody that ever rode that spot that big.
Right.
And that really defined the unrideable because that wave is physically impossible to paddle into.
Right.
And even 12 years later, the push, we're a lot of the surfers are pushing the boundary of what's paddleable, but that is still way below what's been towed already, and will always be below what's towable. We'll never be able to paddle into waves that move that quickly. In fact, this last summer, there was a swell during a big event that they have down there where all the best pros in the world were there, and they were getting towed in at that spot, and it was that big, equally that big, and possibly bigger, and I think that Kelly Slater was quoted as saying, "These people are out of their minds," and just watch from a boat, and I don't know if anybody made a wave that day. I think everybody that caught a wave got crashed, and the fact that no one was killed was amazing. But that particular wave changed people's perspective about what was possible to ride, because up until then, it was a little more ambiguous because we've been riding these giant waves offshore, and you couldn't really capture the magnitude. And this location in Tahiti breaks right on a barrier reef, and you can sit in a boat right next to it, and there's no mistaking what it's doing. And I think that changed everybody's whole perspective about. I describe it as the 4-minute mile. No one could break the 4-minute mile, and once somebody broke the 4-minute mile, then a bunch of people broke the 4-minute mile. And I have a saying, it's one monkey see, monkey do. So the monkey saw it, and then all the monkeys try to do it. But even then, still, we're not. Even to this day, those type of waves, even when you're towed in, it's not a sure thing you're going to make it. It just gives you the opportunity to actually apply your skill as a surfer to complete the ride.
Well, I agree. It was the 4-minute mile because anyone who reads Surfing Magazine saw the cover, and the cover said, "Oh my God," which sums it up perfectly, right? You've been asked about this 1,000 million times. 12 years later, do you think about the wave differently, the moment differently, the experience differently?
No, I mean, when I watch that video, I still get a knot in my stomach, and remember that day, and I think instinctually my body knows what that means, like what that wave means when it does that. When I watched the video from this giant swell that they had this summer, I had been invited down. I had a broken foot at the time, which my wife probably thought was lucky for me. I didn't have to go, but it makes me nauseous.
When you see the wall of water about to smack right down on you, do you have a visceral memory now still of that about to wash right over you?
I have a memory of the internal struggle that I had, which was the battle between good and evil. And inside of me, one side was saying jump off, and the other side was saying if you jump off, you can't make it.
You're dead.
And so I kept going back and forth between the two, and jump, don't jump, jump, don't jump, jump, don't jump. And obviously I didn't jump, and I won the argument that I was having with myself at that moment, not to jump, because if you jump, then you can't make it. So I was glad I made it.
A question from the audience, and it's basically the same question I have. What's your scariest moment surfing?
It's a long list. There's a lot. I have had a lot of them. I think that they get to they blend together, and I think I don't give them a lot of room to live in me. Those scary moments, I want to push those away because I don't want them to be able to affect my performance at some future point. So I always say don't practice for what you don't want to have happen. So I work on that. But I was, as a young child, I was rescued a lot, like weekly rescued. And I lived at Bonsai Pipeline on Oahu, which is, at the time, was the most dangerous beach in the world. And I'd literally, like once or twice a week, I'd wash out to sea and be rescued by the lifeguards. So I had a lot of scary moments very young. I had a scary moment this last year, actually, on the flying board, because you're booted into it. You're connected to it, and with snowboard boots and bindings. And I was held down for 2 waves, which until this point, I had never been held down for 2 waves. So I had some time to think, and was glad I had more air than I thought I might.
What were you thinking?
I'd like to get up to the top. Where the air is. I'm almost there. I wonder if the next wave's coming yet. That same internal conversation that I have with myself all the time.
I go to a lot of Bruce Springsteen shows, and Bruce says, "Is anybody alive out there?" And I think that's a lot of what you're talking about. The feeling of being truly, magnificently alive. Is that what you're chasing?
Thank you. Yes. Be really knowing that you are truly, not just walking dead. So, and I think that's sometimes something to deal with. I describe it, we have the post-traumatic big wave syndrome where after you get that high of truly being alive, then you get the low of, oh my gosh, am I still really just alive?
Yeah.
And so we deal with that as well.
And so let me ask you a really deadly serious question. What do you do when you're done? I mean, okay, you do have the lull, and then you get back in the boat and you go, okay, the theme of this conference is what's next? Do you say to yourself, what's next?
Well, I think when it's like anything, when you have a problem, when you realize there's a problem, that's the way, or when you understand the problem, you can help solve the problem. When you don't think there is one, then that's really when there's the biggest one. And it's a little bit like global warming. You know, if you think it's not happening, that's probably when it's the most dangerous. And if you really believe it is, then you're aware of it, and then you can combat it and do things about it. And for me, I know that if I'm aware of the come down that I'm going to have after I have a thrill like one of these rides, then I'm able to combat that. It's you go about, the low becomes less low because you sleep better, you eat better, you're aware of that it's coming, so you know how to combat it instead of just being in denial that it's actually happening, and then really, go to the bottom.
And so I think we maybe have time for one or two more questions. How much longer do you think you can keep doing this?
I'm hoping for a while. I don't want to stop anytime soon.
I mean, you're obviously in fantastic, super studly shape. I mean, but all of us, it keeps going, right?
I think honestly, when I think about it, I think it'll be a mental decision. That'll be something, unlike some other sports, like football, where you're just so broken because of the beating that they consistently take, that you can't do it because just the pieces aren't in together. I think mine will be more of the psychological aspect of always being ready, the exhaustion of that, of being, that ever alert, ever ready. You don't know when it's coming, but you're going to be ready, because that's what you live under when you're trying to pursue riding a giant surf, is that you live under, you don't know when it's going to happen. You got some idea of a window when it could, but it really can come at any time, and then you have to be really ready when it does to kind of put your butt on the line, lay everything out and put yourself on the line. And that gets exhausting. I think that when I look at it, what's the difficult thing of the whole thing now that I've been at it, 48 years, I think that's the most difficult part, is the mental preparation and the ever readiness to go lay everything out on the line. I go, that's the thing that at the end I might just go, it doesn't mean I won't ride giant surf, but maybe I won't be like preparing every winter for the biggest thing that can get thrown at me and gearing up for that emotionally. The training, I think, will just, I think I'm going to do that forever, just because that's part of being, having a good quality of life. But the mental exhaustion from being ready to lay it all out, that's the part that starts to tax you.
But right now you're still there, mentally?
Where are we going?
Out to the ocean. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And our next session coming right up is bidding for events. It's been a real pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Laird Hamilton, everybody. The one and only.